Welcome to my channel people. Author link will be on the description, make sure to check it out. In the Pure Land, Mara received the report about what happened to the 7 Soul Reapers they sent to deal with a weak ninja village hidden in the sound, and his eyes couldn't help but widen in surprise. Did those dead hunters anticipate our attack on the village hidden in the sound? What kind of level of scheming could this person possess to anticipate our actions to such a degree? Wondered Mara before he let out a sigh and muttered, Lord Izumo won't like this news, he's probably already aware of the situation thanks to his connection to the Pure Land. Still, I will have to report anyways. After concluding his thoughts, Mara slowly made his way to Izumo's throne room, but surprisingly, the usual sound of the ghost screaming completely disappeared. His mood is far worse than expected, was the thought on Mara's head as he shot a look at the suffering souls that stopped their screaming, not because they weren't being tortured anymore, but because of the terrifying aura gushing from the silent throne room, and it was so terror-inducing to the point that they forgot about their pain. Mara calmly made his way inside the throne room while staring at the ground the whole way courtesy of his hunched back, and he was also hit by the terrifying aura, although he seemed more resistant than those souls, showing just what kind of monster was hiding under his frail appearance. Lord Izumo, the attack failed. We suspect that the one who interfered must be part of the dead hunters since he used similar attacks to theirs and even collected the bodies in a similar way. There was no response for a long time after Mara finished his report, only an eerie silence that covered the throne room as a dark and deathly aura seeped into every inch of the room. Mara raised his head to stare at Izumo, and he finally saw to what extent his anger has risen. His reddish and orange hair appeared to have ignited into dark flames, and his whole figure reeked of the scent of death as he contemplated silently, and Mara felt a chill just from staring at him. The playful and lazy Izumo was no more, as the man who stood before him was the incarnation of death itself, the same person he lost to for the possession of the Pure Land ages ago. Mara, do you remember what happens when someone forces my hand? Spoke Izumo calmly, and Mara recalled some distant memories before he answered. A fate worse than death is what awaits them. Izumo nodded calmly at this before he waved his hand, causing a shockwave to pass through all of the Pure Lands, and Mara couldn't help but widen his eyes as he asked, "Are you sure? This will mess up with the very nature of this world." However, in the face of Mara's worries, Izumo simply smirked darkly and said, "Only chaos can erase the sins of our failures." Mara remained silent as he thought, this is no normal chaos. In one of the dead hunters' hidden bases, Kabuto was trying his best to modify his Edo Tensei so that he could regain control of the evil ghosts emerging from the Pure Lands. It's becoming even harder every day. Someone is definitely interfering with the working of the Pure Lands. This is what Kabuto concluded, and he didn't want to imagine what kind of level of power was required to achieve such a thing. However, he suddenly felt a tremor coursing through his body, and his connection with the Pure Land was suddenly destroyed, which made him receive a terrifying backlash that almost destroyed his soul. But the shock in his heart was far bigger than the damage he received, as he instantly yelled, "Impossible," and called Bakurio right away. After analyzing what his true clone spoke with Kabuto, Bakurio remained silent for a long time before he let out a sigh and thought, "This is truly beyond my expectations." What Izumo did was nothing short of terrifying. To use Edo Tensei, someone needs to sacrifice a life and use a body part of the person they desire to summon to create a connection with their soul in the Pure Land. But what if the Pure Land was already under their control? What Izumo did is overriding the laws of the Pure Land so that, whenever someone's reached the end of their life, instead of their souls going to the Pure Land, they become sacrifices for the terrifying thing he cast on the world, an ultimate version of Edo Tensei. Not to mention that thanks to him already in control of the souls in the Pure Land, he didn't require any body parts to revive whoever he wanted. In less than a day, Bakurio received countless reports of old legends reviving, and imagine the shock of the world as a new ninja village was created under the leadership of these dead people, a village that contained countless cage-level ninja as well as famous clans such as the Uzumaki, the Kagaya, the Hagoromo, and many others that vanished in the annals of history. But that wasn't all, as some beasts from the various holy lands also started to revive, and they all marched to this new village while creating chaos wherever they went. "This is bad, should we destroy them?" asked Hagoromo to his mother and brother, who could also observe all of these changes, but Hamura calmly shook his head and said, "Our enemies aren't these people, plus I'm sure you noticed that only ninjas from the past century were revived. Older souls were probably already assimilated by the Pure Land. Still, even if it's only people from the last century, it's still a terrifying force for the ninja of this world to face. And if you add to that the beasts, hell, and the demons, surviving is simply impossible. Hamura had a dark look on his face similar to his brother's, and even Kagaya had a frown on her face as she remembered Bakurio's words of not making a move, so she eventually let out a sigh and said, "Let's trust in the man that freed our hearts. I'm sure he won't sit still and watch this world face its downfall." Hagoromo clenched his hands and he couldn't help but turn to his mother and yell, "How can we let one man bear all of this responsibility on his shoulders?" However, Hagoromo suddenly froze when he stared at his mother's face, which was full of anger, and from her activated Byakugan and the way she was gritting her teeth, it was clear that she was barely holding herself back from taking action, prompting Hamura to let out a sigh and say, "I'm sure we all feel the same." Meanwhile, Bakurio remained still in his room as he contemplated a way to face this new disaster, but he simply couldn't find any. This was an immortal army with human intelligence and a variety of abilities. Dealing with them in normal ways is simply a dream. After a few minutes of contemplation, Bakurio finally opened his eyes and raised his right hand, and if anyone was in the room they would feel life escaping their body from the terrifying aura of death that was dancing on top of it, and he muttered calmly, "It seems like I will have to master death, and the way of the souls, and even go beyond if I want to contest with Izumo." As Bakurio muttered this, he shot his system a look and saw what he gained after gaining energy control and trying to understand the workings of his Yomi no Kuni Death Chakra Transformation Level 6, and there was another skill that he gained from his constant creation of clones, Soul Control Level 12. These two will be my top priority for now, and until I can contest with Izumo in the control of death, I will have to let the dead hunters deal with the new emerging hidden village. Those ghosts and rising zombies will have to be left to the hidden villages to deal with, at least for now. Time slowly passed in the ninja world, and after many losses and experiencing the severity of the situation, the village hidden in the clouds eventually joined the alliance of samurai, ninjas, and sacred beasts to face the many forces. In the middle of all of this chaos, Bakurio's academies achieved their purpose as countless new ninjas were being constantly produced by them and sent to hunt down the weaker beasts, while the stronger beasts were being dealt with thanks to the leadership of strong groups like the Akatsuki and other S-class mercenary. Some unknown groups also seemed to be emerging and dealing with the beasts in their own way, and they attracted Bakurio's attention, although he wasn't planning to approach them, at least not for now. The first batch of Bakurio's students became very skilled in dealing with the beasts, and they started to lead new students to teach them how to deal with the various types of beasts, and among them, Sogetsu, Kazuki, Naruto, and Sasuke shined spectacularly. Meanwhile, the devils from hell were being dealt with using almost the full forces of the hidden villages, which left the new hidden village of the dead completely to Bakurio to deal with, while the tailed beasts were struggling to stop the advancements of the demons. Of course, these weren't all the forces involved in this mess, as the various beasts from the Holy Lands were assisting in dealing with the strongest beasts, as well as the rising dead and ghosts, which were especially handled by the monkeys of the Mountain of Flowers and Fruits. So, eventually the situation started to stabilize, despite the people having to barely survive day by day, resulting in a tsunami of dark chakra generated every day, but at least the situation wasn't as bad as it was in the beginning. Ellipsis. In Konoha, in a secluded location that was protected by many seals that completely isolated it from the outside world, Bakurio created a new true clone and gave him a simple mission. Go to the Land of Iron and find the hidden sword master living there and try to convince him to accept you as a student. It's time to evolve my stagnant sword mastery, he muttered, and his true clone calmly nodded and began his journey while changing his appearance at the same time. Meanwhile, he himself didn't waste any time and started training his death transformation and soul control once more. He's been doing his best for more than 3 months, and he was reaping the fruits of his labor as his mastery in the two domains was increasing rapidly to the point that he could now create a true clone every day without suffering serious damage from it, and their quality was also increasing since he learned how to cut a bigger part of his soul without causing serious damage to it. My first true clones peak at around the elite Jonin level in their base strength, but they can fight those that are a few levels higher than them thanks to my mastery and skills, but now, their base level has been slowly rising and they can even reach mid-cage level. After pausing for a while, Bakurio's eyes flickered slightly as he thought, Soon, I will have a terrifying army under my command. This last true clone he just created wasn't the first one that had a unique mission. In fact, he has many clones each tasked with a certain thing, despite the majority of them having to deal with the annoying revived people. One clone in particular was trying to gain the friendships of the rest of the tailed beasts, another was training endlessly in his true fighting mastery, while some worked as teachers in his academies. And his hard work was paying off as he made a new friendship with the four-tailed Son Goku, and he gained a special ability from it. A great one that will further increase the destructiveness of his blaze release. Heart of Lava. Increase the effect of all fire and earth release ninjutsu by 200%. Other than this, Bakurio also raised countless ninjutsu to level 100, he had to learn them when he became a teacher, so he didn't slack at all and did his best so that he can teach his students to the best of his ability, and he was surprised to find those skills disappearing and he gained new ones instead. Congratulations host on mastering more than 100 ninjutsu in all of the 7 main elements being fire, earth, water, lightning, wind, yin, and yang. Host has gained the skills fire manipulation, water manipulation, earth manipulation, wind manipulation, lightning manipulation, yin manipulation, and yang manipulation. Fire manipulation level 1 allows the user to control, shape, and concentrate fire in any way they want with minimal waste in chakra and effort, including the one that's not produced by them. And the higher the level of this skill, the more the host can manipulate fire that's not generated by them. The descriptions of the other skills were similar to this one, and Bakurio was nothing but excited by the prospect of using his enemy's own attack to fuel his own. After all, chakra-based attacks created by an enemy are almost impossible to control since the user has complete control over his own chakra and what it creates. Unlike natural elements such as people manipulating the natural earth or water to attack or defend. However, with this new skill, Bakurio can easily surpass this impossible hurdle and become completely immune to the elements. So, Bakurio decisively left 7 clones to work on these skills alone. Meanwhile, in the Land of Iron, Bakurio's true clone changed his appearance and adorned a sword before he approached the guarded gates of their capital. He was quickly allowed entry as he showed his affiliation with Konoha, and them being in an alliance with each other made things easier. Now then, where am I going to find this master swordsman? Muttered Bakurio as he never heard of such a character in the original series. In fact, he was sure that this character didn't make an appearance even despite the world almost coming to its downfall multiple times. Guess I can only search slowly, thought Bakurio as he reread his mission to evolve his sword mastery advancement quest. Find the legendary sword master hiding in the Land of Iron and make him accept you under his tutelage. TCH. He's hiding, so it's definitely not easy to find him among the countless normal people. But the mission states that he was a legendary swordsman, so I guess the best way is to start asking about the legends of this land, as he might be one of them. As Bakurio concluded his thought, he made his way through the tense and wary city that was in a constant struggle against the beasts and the dead like any other hidden village, and stopped at a dango shop that had an old woman working at it with a warm smile that contrasted with the heavy mood in this land, and Yuki's eyes couldn't help but flicker silently when he saw this. "Oh, welcome young man." Bakurio nodded at her calmly and ordered a few dango, and the old woman happily started preparing his order before a little girl that appeared to be her granddaughter and whose age was around 6 or 7 served them to him with a dark look that contrasted with the old lady. "Here you go, mister." Bakurio accepted the food while his mind wondered. This place is different than the ninja world. I can feel it in the air, it feels sharp, like a sword is ready to be drawn at any moment. As Bakurio was contemplating and enjoying his dango, the old woman approached him with a smile and asked, "Do you like them?" Bakurio calmly nodded and replied, "Indeed, they are quite delicious. I'm glad. I still have it in me to cook, it seems," replied the old woman enthusiastically, while the little girl sat on a chair silently to the side, so Bakurio couldn't help but ask, "Why aren't you worried like the rest of the people? Even that little girl seems to be aware of the situation better than you." The old woman's smile didn't waver at all as she replied, "What's there to worry about? Our mighty Lord Murakuma will defend our land if it's ever in mortal danger." "Oh, this is interesting," thought Bakurio as his eyes flickered silently. Bakurio was pleasantly surprised by the fact that he was already starting to find clues regarding the possible identity of the sword master he was searching for, and his eyes couldn't help but flicker in intrigue noticing the weird look on his face. The little girl suddenly stared at him with a dark look and said, "You are probably not from here. Don't bother with these myths. No one believes them anymore other than someone old like Grandma Shu." The grandma shrugged the girl's words with a laugh before she sat beside Bakurio and asked him, "You don't seem worried either about what's happening outside the city. Guess I'm not the only one who believes in Lord Murakumo." Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly as he gazed at the smiling grandma before he smiled and said, "Life is too short to worry too much. I rather enjoy some delicious dango." The grandma beamed at him and she felt like she found a kindred spirit as she said, "I wish Yoshino-chan can learn a thing or two from you." Bakurio shot the little girl a look, but she simply snorted at them before going into the kitchen and started occupying herself with cleaning the dishes, so Bakurio couldn't help but ask Grandma Shu curiously, "What wrong with that girl?" Grandma Shu lost a bit of her smile as she said, "She lost her parents when they were attacked by my late husband who rose from the dead, and it made her heart fall into the darkness. Not to mention that life is getting more and more hard as the business isn't as good as it used to be, which made her mature faster." Bakurio pondered silently before he said, "I'm sorry to hear that." The grandma suddenly beamed again at him and said, "Don't worry, I can still manage even if the times get tougher, plus I'm sure the situation will soon go back to normal." "Oh, is this your belief in this person Murakumo that makes you think so?" asked Bakurio curiously, and the grandma instantly nodded and began rambling endlessly. "Young man, you are probably a samurai as well, so you will eventually learn about this. In the land of iron, we have a legend of a hidden protector who with his sword alone can even split mountains and part the rivers. His name is Murakumo, and it's said that he's the founder of the samurai path and no one can wield the sword like him. He's also a legendary blacksmith, as even a legendary sword such as Kusanagi was forged by him. Oh, isn't that Orochimaru's slimy sword? I wonder if this guy Murakumo intended for it to be used that way. He will probably kill himself if he ever finds out the weird places Orochimaru hides it in. Although it's indeed a formidable sword," thought Bakurio calmly while listening to the excited grandma as she concluded, "Everything will be fine in the end thanks to Lord Murakumo, this is something I'm sure of." However, Yoshino suddenly came out of the kitchen and yelled, "Nothing will be fine, no one will bring back mom and dad." "Shi-chan." Grandma Shu felt slightly disheartened when she saw this, but as she tried to console her granddaughter, they started hearing weird screams as a huge zombie that appeared to be made from the flesh and limbs of multiple people came rushing down the street with an unstoppable momentum, and his direction was none other than the dango shop that Bakurio was in. Yoshino couldn't help but drop the plate that she didn't finish cleaning yet as she froze in horror as the giant zombie crashed into their small shop and made a huge hole in it. Then, it calmly eyed everyone, but it seemed attracted to Yoshino for some reason as its eyes flickered with an evil light and a huge toothy grin covered its abnormally large face, exposing a set of countless razor-sharp teeth. "Stay away from me," stuttered Yoshino with a horrified look on her face while her grandpa quickly rushed to her side and stood in front of her and faced the huge monster with a broom in her hand with a determined look on her face, although Bakurio could tell that her legs were shaking. The monster eyed them coldly before it raised a huge club that it was holding in its hand and prepared to deal with the nuisance that appeared in front of it, and Yoshino couldn't help but scream, "No, don't harm Grandma." However, the monster's smile only grew wider as it swung its club ruthlessly at Grandma Shu, and Yoshino can only yell, "Someone please help." Thump! The sound of something hitting the floor echoed, and Yoshino's face was full of horror as she opened her closed eyes expecting to see her grandmother's dead body lying on the floor, but she instead was stupefied as she saw the young man from earlier standing in front of them with his sheathed sword. As for the monster, its hand that was holding the club was severed with a clean cut on its shoulder, exposing its bones and the rotten flesh it was made of. "Didn't you hear the little girl? She said don't approach me. Geez, why can't these zombies ever act as gentlemen? Like minions like boss, I guess," muttered Bakurio with a shrug, and he could see blood vessels appearing in the monster's eyes. "You." Yoshino muttered in wonder, but she noticed the monster moving its neck rapidly, planning to bite Bakurio's head off with its sharp teeth. Careful! She screamed, but Bakurio simply smiled, and he didn't seem to do anything as they can only see his hand that was holding the handle of his sword flicker for an instant before the monster's head went flying into the air before it split into 4 parts, yet his sword never appeared to leave its sheath. Yoshino's eyes and mouth widened from the sheer surprise of the magical scene she just witnessed while Grandma Shu's eyes simply lit up in excitement as she thought, "We were saved. This man is a true samurai." Then, Bakurio calmly removed his hand from the handle of his sword and turned to them and gave Grandma Shu a pouch while saying, "Thanks for the meal. There should be enough money here to pay for it as well as repair the damage your shop suffered. Consider it my thanks for keeping me company as I ate." Then, Bakurio simply turned around and started making his way out of the shop, leaving the pair of grandma and granddaughter frozen in shock before the grandma turned her attention to the heavy pouch and muttered, "Thanks." Meanwhile, Yoshino hugged her grandma and cried while thanking God that she didn't lose her last family member, although only after some samurai who were running after the zombie came rushing into their shop to investigate what happened did she finally realize that she didn't thank their savior. "I will definitely find him and thank him," she vowed in her head as she listened to her grandma explaining what happened to the samurai, although her eyes kept becoming absent-minded from time to time. Meanwhile, Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly as he thought, "That girl is quite special. I didn't expect someone like her to exist in such a random shop. Is this why their family seems to be getting targeted? If this idea were to be true, it means that Izumo and the others are trying to kill people with huge potential, but most importantly, similar to how he could use his appraisal ability to inspect people, Izumo must have a similar ability to assess talents. Still, to think that a girl has a Greatmaster level of talent in swordsmanship. This is truly surprising. She will be a great addition to our forces if trained properly," thought Bakurio as he started searching for more clues about Murakumo. After 1 week of staying in the capital of the Land of Iron that was called Fang, Bakurio grew much more familiar with this place that was covered in snow most of the time. He also got closer to Yoshino and her grandma as he really enjoyed their dango and became a regular customer there, although the little girl didn't stop pestering him. "Oi teacher, when are you going to teach me swordsmanship?" asked Yoshino while delivering him the dango he ordered, and Bakurio simply replied saying, "I'm not your teacher," before he started enjoying his dango. Little Yoshino bit her lips and kept pestering him until her grandma came out of the kitchen and said, "Shi-chan, stop bothering our customer when he's eating." Yoshino, who was punching Bakurio's leg for ignoring her, stopped after hearing this before she glared at Bakurio for one last time and yelled, "Fine. I will learn on my own. It can't be that hard anyways." Then, she directly ran out of the shop after seeing Bakurio ignore her even despite all of this. "Shi-chan, wait!" yelled her grandpa, but she couldn't catch up to her, so she worriedly approached Bakurio and said, "Sorry to keep bothering you, but can you please bring her back? That girl is very reckless and she might injure herself." Bakurio calmly ate his dango despite all of this and simply said, "Murakumo, do you have any idea where I can find him?" The worried grandma froze slightly and she couldn't believe her ears for a second as she asked Bakurio, "You also believe in Lord Murakumo?" Bakurio shook his head calmly and said, "Believe is a strong word, but I don't think it's that far-fetched for him to actually exist considering the world we live in." The grandma's eyes appeared very vigorous as she said, "Not many people know this, but one day, when my late husband was collecting ingredients in the wild, he was attacked by a giant snake that tried to swallow him whole, but then a blinding white light flashed in front of him and the head of the snake was instantly severed. My late husband was sure that it wasn't the doing of a normal samurai." Bakurio's eyes flickered slightly as he asked her, "Is this why you firmly believe in this legend despite all the mocking you receive for it?" Grandma Shu nodded slightly before she said, "My husband wouldn't lie to me. Where and when did this happen?" asked Bakurio curiously, to which Grandma Shu pondered for a while as if she was trying to refresh her memory before she said, "I believe it was to the east of the Three Wolves Mountain and it happened 5 years ago." "I see. Thanks for the meal as always." Then Bakurio calmly stood up and made his way out of the shop, and Grandma Shu couldn't help but worriedly shout, "What about Shi-chan?" "Don't worry, I will take care of her," replied Bakurio, finally easing the worried woman's heart. After leaving the shop, Bakurio calmly started tracking the smell of the little girl using his strong senses while thinking, "It seems like there's definitely something weird in the east of the Three Wolves Mountains. So far, more than 8 people have experienced similar incidents describing a white sharp light saving them. Could it be someone that can use sharp release? As Bakurio was lost in his thoughts, he suddenly found himself standing in front of the east gate of the capital and a frown instantly covered his face as he muttered, "Don't tell me." Stupid girl. Bakurio instantly rushed out of the gate with a terrifying speed while covering himself in a lightning release chakra cloak that further increased his speed as he made his way into the wilderness, and after some time, he could finally hear the sound of a girl screaming, prompting him to further increase his speed only to end up greeted with a weird scene. Yoshino was holding a stick in her hand while running away from a leopard-like beast, and she had many bleeding scratches all over her body. The beast was probably playing with her for a while, but Bakurio noticed that Yoshino's stick was stained with blood and the beast had one of its eyes ruptured, so he easily guessed what happened. This girl is truly reckless, thought Bakurio as he watched the beast pouncing at Yoshino's defenseless back and ready to rip her apart, and he prepared to kill it, but suddenly, a white light flew from the distance and directly severed the head of the beast from the rest of its body, causing Bakurio to widen his eyes in astonishment. However, he quickly controlled his emotions and rushed to Yoshino's side first and noticed that she was bleeding from multiple injuries, and if he were to let this go on, she would die from losing too much blood. "Teacher, what are you doing here? Were you the one that saved me?" asked Yoshino with a weak but relieved voice as she threw herself at Bakurio, who gently caught her and started healing her injuries, which surprised her. But she was even more surprised when he said, "You came here to find the swordsman that saved your grandpa, right? He was the one that saved you just now. So, Grandma wasn't lying. I want to grow stronger, no matter what." Bakurio could see the intense desire in the girl's eyes, but he suddenly felt someone approaching them from the distance wearing a monk's clothing as well as a round straw hat that covered his face, which distracted him especially when he asked Yoshino calmly, "Little girl, would you like to be my student?" Yoshino stared in shock at the monk while Bakurio calmly stared at his simple-looking sword and concluded, "This guy must be related to the legend of Murakumo, or you Lord Murakumo?" asked Yoshino hopefully, but the monk simply shook his head and replied, "No, my name is Minamoto Reiko." Yoshino had a clearly disappointed look on her face, but Bakurio was completely different as he eyed the man in front of him and thought, "This guy is strong. He's at the super cage level." Then he simply grinned and stood in front of the healed Yoshino to face the monk that had been ignoring him all this while. "Interesting, you are probably related to this person Murakumo in one way or another, right?" Hearing this, Yoshino's eyes lit up and she couldn't help but ask curiously, "Is that true?" The monk calmly patted his hat and responded, "Who knows? You will have to become my student before I can answer your question, but you don't have the talent for it." Bakurio's eyes widened slightly as he wondered, this guy can sense sword talent. Is this why he's interested in Yoshino? It seems like my doubts aren't wrong. Reiko thought that his words would intrigue Yoshino into accepting his offer, but her curiosity suddenly changed into doubt as she said, "What are you talking about? Teacher is an amazing swordsman. I saw with my own eyes what he can do." Reiko frowned slightly and said, "Impossible, he doesn't have any swordsmanship talent, although he appears to be an Uchiha from the symbol on his clothes, so he probably copied someone else's swordsmanship and used it as his own." Really? Yoshino wasn't convinced and she couldn't help but shoot Bakurio a questioning look, but he simply smiled and responded to Reiko, "Who knows? You will have to become my student if you want me to answer you, although you don't seem to have the talent for it, so that's impossible." Yoshino froze slightly before she realized that those words were directed at Reiko in return for him insulting Bakurio's talent, but instead of him getting mad, Reiko simply smiled calmly and said, "I'm sorry if you found my words inappropriate. This guy is truly abnormal, his heart is in the right state, dealing with him won't be easy. Guess if provoking him doesn't work, I will have to simply act unreasonably." As Bakurio concluded his thoughts, he simply smiled and said, "Show me what can you teach Yoshino," before he simply coated his sword in chakra and sent a flying slash at Reiko. "Sigh, I guess I don't have a choice but teach you a lesson," replied Reiko before calmly dodging Bakurio's slash by tilting his body and sent a simple slash of his own, although, in Bakurio's eyes, it was anything but simple as he could feel danger from that chakra slash. Bakurio's Sharingan revolved silently as he analyzed Reiko's simple slash, yet his eyes couldn't help but widen the more he stared at it. This is Without a trace of hesitation, Bakurio instantly tilted his whole body backward and barely dodged the attack, and he didn't regret this decision in the slightest as the area behind him turned into a scene of absolute destruction as countless trees and hills were cut in half by the normal-looking attack. Oh. The Sharingan is truly interesting, spoke Reiko with intrigue in his voice, although his expression was still hidden by his hat. Teacher, are you okay? Asked Yoshino when she saw the level of destruction caused by the simple-looking attack. However, Bakurio remained silent as his eyes narrowed. He used at least 10 times the chakra I used and focused it on his sword with such an ease that it appeared completely natural, yet very destructive at the same time. This guy is strong. After concluding his thoughts, Bakurio simply sheathed his sword and spoke calmly. It seems like you are truly skilled. However, that's not good enough if you want to teach Yoshino. Just good chakra handling techniques aren't enough. Reiko seemed surprised by how calm Bakurio was acting despite him showing the disparity in their strength, and he couldn't help but grin and was about to challenge him again, but a voice suddenly echoed in his head and he was so surprised to the point that he felt a chill as he quickly turned around to stare at the damage Bakurio's attack caused. Don't tell me. Reiko had a look of realization on his face while Yoshino simply held Bakurio's clothes and asked, "Teacher, did you lose?" Seeing the damage that Reiko's attack caused made it seem like he lost, and Bakurio simply pointed behind Reiko and a gust of wind suddenly swept, causing the normal scene to drastically change, although in a different way than Reiko's. Behind him stood a giant tree with plenty of leaves, but as the gust of wind blew on it, Yoshino saw something so shocking to the point that it would remain with her for the rest of her life. Every leaf on that giant tree was split cleanly in half. And as the gust of wind blew them, they slowly fell down to the ground while Reiko stared at them silently. This was Bakurio's ingenious attack that was actually hundreds of small slashes constructed into one. Teacher, this is amazing. How did you do that? Didn't you only use one slash? Yoshino's eyes were sparkling to a fanatic degree as she couldn't understand just what kind of magic is capable of this, but her intuition told her that it was something unique. Such terrifying mastery, it seems like the master was right. This man is not ordinary, thought Reiko before he turned to Bakurio and clasped his hand before he said, "My master wishes to see you, would you like to accompany me?" It seems like showing my terrifying mastery of controlling chakra paid off and the fish took the bait, thought Bakurio with a smile before he nodded at Reiko and said to Yoshino, "Come with me, this could be a good opportunity for you as well, although I will have to inform your grandma just in case." Then, Bakurio created a shadow clone and sent it to inform the grandma that they might be late before he started following Reiko, who suddenly asked, "Excuse me for my rudeness, but I haven't asked for your name yet." Bakurio's eyes were calm as he said, "My name is Uchiha Sakai." Reiko faintly smiled and said, "No, I meant your real name." Bakurio paused slightly and Yoshino couldn't help but stare at him in shock. However, he didn't mind and simply said, "Your master Murakumo is quite good at observing people." Reiko didn't respond when he heard this, but Yoshino was overwhelmed with all of this information. Teacher's real name isn't Sakai. But why is he hiding his identity? And are we really going to meet that legendary swordsman? The little girl found herself lost in her thoughts, but it wasn't long before they ventured deeper into the forest and suddenly found themselves in front of a giant waterfall that had a simple house built beside its shores. "Wow, this place is so beautiful, but how come it's not snowing here?" asked Yoshino curiously, and Bakurio calmly responded to her, "This is thanks to a formation we entered that teleported us here. We are not even in the land of iron anymore. This is the land of mountains, quite the distance from where we were, really?" Yoshino's eyes widened in disbelief, which was soon overwhelmed with curiosity, while Reiko simply froze and stared at Bakurio in disbelief as he thought, "How does he know?" However, an old voice suddenly sounded from the house, and soon after exited an old man. He had long white hair and a long white beard, but his body appeared fit and youthful in contrast to his voice as he spoke. "Bakurio Uchiha, you truly are a terrifying genius of this era." Bakurio calmly stared at the man that appeared in front of him. "Murakumo, I assume. I'm honored to know that someone living in seclusion like you knows of my existence." As Bakurio said this, he found it was not needed anymore to keep his identity hidden. He only did it in the first place to avoid worrying the people of the Land of Iron with his presence, since he only appears in case of emergencies. Yoshino watched in surprise as Bakuryo's short hair grew in length until it reached his lower back and his wide eyebrows turned sharper. This old man lives in seclusion, but I keep an eye on the world in case something interesting happens. Please come in, spoke Murakumo calmly, appearing like any gentle old man you would find in your neighborhood, but Bakuryo could feel the terrifying sharpness hidden in every single one of his gestures. I can't measure how strong this guy is. Bakuryo's eyes shined with interest as he nodded his head and followed after the old man while Yoshino clung to him tightly. After sitting down, Reiko went to prepare some tea while Murakumo observed Yoshino silently and asked, "Little girl, you have the talent to become a great swordsman, would you like to be my second student?" Yoshino was shocked. She was actually sitting in front of a legend, yet he was actually interested in making her his disciple. She felt over the clouds with happiness, but she suddenly wondered, whose teacher then? Why would such a legend accept meeting him? She couldn't help but hung her head down, especially when she saw Bakuryo leave the decision up to her, but eventually, after clenching her teeth, she looked at Murakumo and said, "I will do as teacher says." Bakuryo smiled slightly at the little girl and he couldn't help but poke her on the forehead. "I'm not your teacher," and she simply retaliated by punching and kicking him on the leg. Murakumo on the other hand was surprised by this, but he simply smiled and turned to Bakuryo and asked, "What do you think?" Hearing this, Bakuryo's smile suddenly disappeared as he turned to stare at Murakumo, and this time he was serious. A terrifying coldness and killing intent gushed from every cell of his body along with a strong aura of death that made Murakumo narrow his eyes as a terrifying sharpness gushed from his body. "I want to ask you something first. What's your position on the situation of the world?" Bakuryo couldn't give him such a talented girl just to let him groom a future enemy for him, and Murakumo seemed to realize this as he said, "You want to know what our purpose is?" Replied Murakumo calmly as Reiko calmly placed the tea between them, although he was also releasing a terrifying aura when he heard his master speak, to the shock of Yoshino, who started trembling and directly hid behind Bakuryo, who calmly nodded despite facing two monsters, and the oldest one of the two calmly spoke. "My purpose is simple. Free my brother who fell to the darkness." "Brother?" muttered Bakuryo. This was truly far from the answer he was expecting. "Yes, brother." As Murakumo said this, he started releasing an eerie aura that made Yoshino tremble in fear, while Bakuryo simply narrowed his eyes as he asked, "You are a demon? You think a normal human can live as long as I did?" Spoke Murakumo with a smile while rubbing his long beard, but Bakuryo wasn't in a joking mood as he directly asked, "Who's your brother?" Murakumo wasn't bothered by Bakuryo's seriousness and simply took a sip from his tea before he dropped a bomb. "My brother's Shuden Doji, I wonder if you ever heard of him." Bakuryo's body froze and his eyes widened in shock as the image of Doji appeared in his head. Those eerie abyssal eyes were similar to the current eyes that Murakumo was displaying. They only contrasted in the color of their hair. But a scene of Doji wielding a simple-looking sword and murdering every single person that stood in his way suddenly became clearer in his mind as he stared at Murakumo. "Oh, you seem to know far more than I thought. As expected of a genius that running the whole world behind the scenes," spoke Murakumo calmly. "Explain yourself. And I hope I like the explanation, otherwise today will be your end," spoke Bakuryo calmly, to which Reiko instantly retrieved his sword and placed it on Bakuryo's neck before he said, "Mind your words." However, Bakuryo wasn't in the least bit intimidated as he calmly sipped on his tea as if Reiko's threat was non-existent and simply stared at Murakumo coldly. Seeing this, Murakumo raised his hand to calm Reiko down before he let out a sigh and said, "Young people these days are quite overconfident. It's okay, I don't plan on hiding anything anyways." "Master," Reiko muttered quietly before he sheathed his sword and stood to the side while Murakumo started telling his story. "Different than you short-lived humans, demons are a race blessed with long longevity, and thanks to it, we were able to create our own unique cultivation techniques way before the existence of chakra. We call it demon aura." Bakuryo nodded slightly as he already had a slight idea about this demon aura and the effects it had on the body. The demon realm was in constant wars after the discovery of demon aura, and those wars went on for centuries until a single demon became strong enough, and along with his 5 loyal followers, he united the demons into creating a somewhat peaceful world. That demon who earned himself the title of Demon King was called Yamato, and he was my own father. At this point, Yoshino and even Bakuryo had shocked looks on their faces that only increased when Murakumo said, As for those 5 followers that helped him claim the throne of the demon world, they were his 2 sons, the dark demon Shuden Doji, the white demon Murakumo, and 3 known demons at the time who were very close to each other. The infernal demon Enja, the peaceful demon Suiya, and the demoness of seals Aster. Bakurio's eyes flickered slightly as his thoughts run all over the place. The demon's aura grants them a certain gift, and the stronger their demon aura is, the stronger this gift will become. Is it possible that they are the descendants of? No, I need to make sure first. As Bakurio concluded his thought, he focused back on Murakumo's story. The peace of the demon world however didn't last long, and that's because of a single event we call the descent of darkness. This must be similar to what happened in the beast world. Thought Bakurio, and his guess was correct as Murakumo calmly explained. My father and the 5 of us along with many strong demons under our rule tried our best to repel that darkness, yet just when we thought we were going to succeed, that bastard Shuden Doji betrayed us for some reason and stabbed our father in the back. Murakumo's eyes were filled with an eerie stillness. Clearly, his hatred has simmered for a long time to the point that it transformed into something much more heartless and terrifying for his own brother. At the end, Father, Enja, and Suiya sacrificed their lives to give us a way out and sent us to this world. Then Aster used her mastery of seals to make sure that the bloodline of our fallen friends can at least continue here, although she made sure to hide it from the eyes of that darkness and even me since she didn't trust me after brother's betrayal, and she used the remainder of her strength to seal the passage of the demon world and left her bloodline here who inherited her gift in seals to keep an eye on the demon world's entrance. However, after thousands of years, you can imagine how they probably already lost their purpose and they weren't even protecting the real entrance anymore. As Bakurio heard this, his eyes couldn't help but narrow slightly as he felt like he confirmed a guess of his before he calmly spoke. So, you hid here all this time while preparing to fight Shuden Doji. Hearing this, Murakumo had a wry smile on his face before he shook his head and said, even if I can beat Doji, it won't be enough to defeat the darkness behind him. When we fought it, he appeared injured, which is why we were able to contend with him in the first place, but now I don't think we stand a chance. It's evident by how easily the beast world that was attacked after us easily fell. Injured, huh? Countless thoughts flashed through Bakurio's head before he calmly smiled and said, don't worry, I will be dealing with that darkness. However, I will require your help to deal with the others. Murakumo couldn't help but let out a chuckle when he heard this. Sorry young man. I'm not trying to underestimate you, but you stand no chance against me, let alone against that monstrosity. Yoshino stared at Bakurio worriedly, but she only saw him smile calmly and he didn't appear to have any aggressive aura surrounding him, but this time when he stared at Murakumo, the latter directly leapt away from him with a frown on his face. What was that just now? Wondered Murakumo, and Reiko was ready to strike as he said, Master, are you okay? I'm fine, replied Murakumo without averting his eyes from Bakurio, who was still smiling as he said, who do you think is more deadly, that darkness or the emptiness you just saw? I can't wait to see who will swallow who in the end. The grin on Bakurio's face was demonic to say the least, but it made Murakumo smile as he approached him and said, you are crazy. Fine, if you think you can beat him, I will bet on you. I don't have anything to lose anyways. Bakurio nodded at him and said, please start by teaching me everything you know about swordsmanship. Murakumo nodded before he said to Reiko, you better not let your new fellow students surpass you. Of course not, responded Reiko confidently before they saw Yoshino whispering softly, can I see my grandma first? Sure, settle everything you have outside, your training will start in a week, spoke Murakumo, and Yoshino nodded fearfully, still not sure how to accept his identity as a demon despite hearing about his tragic past, so Bakurio took her back to fulfill his promise to the old woman and alleviate her worry. After they left, Reiko stared at his master and he couldn't help but ask him, what made you put some distance between the two of you? Murakumo remained silent for a while before he responded, I'm not sure. However, I felt my instincts screaming at me when I stared at his eyes. Those weren't the normal eyes of a human. That man is a monster, for Master to regard him so highly. It seems like I will need to observe him much more closely. Thought Reiko while staring at the empty teacup on the table silently. It seems like the true clone earned the trust of Murakumo. Still, to think that such a being exists while hiding in the shadow of this world, it makes me wonder who else is hiding. Wondered Bakurio as he paused his death and soul training and observed the outside of his room. No matter what, he's going to be a good addition to our forces, but his story also opened many possibilities for the future. Bakurio's vision suddenly crossed a huge distance before it landed on a kid covered in fire and fighting for his life against a pack of giant wolves. Reckless as always, thought Bakurio silently as he observed the kid controlling flames with such an unimaginable proficiency as he fought the much stronger beasts. Are these brothers really related to those demons? But how? Why would they be found near the land of demons alone? Countless thoughts flashed through Bakurio's head, but in the end, he shook his head and returned to his courtyard to focus on his training. He didn't have that much time to waste. 1 week later, the true clones started to officially train under Murakumo's tutelage, and Bakurio instantly received a notification of the completion of his quest and that he can claim the rewards at any time. Meanwhile, Murakumo simply gave a simple order: show me all you can do against Reiko. He wants to test my swordsmanship. Well, I'm also intrigued to see how I fare against the only student of such a monster, thought Bakurio calmly before he took out a sword and faced Reiko, but Murakumo suddenly threw 2 wooden swords at them and said, "You will be using these to spare. The loser will be the one that gets his sword destroyed first." Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly as he caught the wooden sword while Reiko seemed completely relaxed as if he was used to these kinds of things. Is he serious? We can't even channel our chakra into these swords lest we destroy them ourselves. In this case, the sword is more like a burden since we need to protect it rather than using it as a tool to help us spare. What's this old man planning? Bakurio couldn't help but stare doubtfully at the demon old man, but the latter simply rubbed his beard silently and didn't say anything. Meanwhile, Reiko got into a simple sword stance and didn't cover his sword in any chakra before he said, "Get ready. I won't go easy on you just because you are a new student. Is this guy an idiot?" Wondered Bakurio, but Murakumo suddenly gave the signal for the fight to start, and Reiko instantly disappeared and reappeared in front of Bakurio with a slash aimed at his neck. He's fast, but not fast enough, thought Bakurio as he easily anticipated the attack with his future sight and dodged right in time, although the wooden sword grazed his long hair and it actually cut it. Bakurio's eyes narrowed slightly as he couldn't comprehend what just happened. He was sure that Reiko didn't coat his sword in chakra since he was using his 3-tomo Sharingan, yet somehow the latter was able to cut his hair with his blunt wooden sword, and from the looks of it, the same would have happened to his sword if he blocked with it. How did he do this? Wondered Bakurio, but Reiko simply smiled and said, "Not bad, you dodged this one, try dodging my next attack." Kenjutsu. Shadow Slash. Bakurio's Sharingans were pushed to the limit in hope of trying to catch anything, and they eventually did as he felt a weird energy escape from Reiko's sword as he slashed it down and transformed into an invisible horizontal slash that created a deadly cross attack. Is this what I came searching for? Bakurio suddenly closed his eyes to the surprise of Reiko as the main body accepted the reward of his advancement quest. Congratulations host, your level 100 swordsmanship has successfully advanced into sword intent level 1. Bakurio's mind was flooded with a huge amount of information, but it took him less than an instant to process all of it as he opened his eyes with a weird sharp glint in them and slashed his sword against Reiko's attack. The result was clear. He lost, and half of his sword was sent flying into the air before it was nailed to the ground beside him. However, Bakurio had a wide grin on his face. Unlike Reiko, was shocked as he stared at his chipped sword and spoke, "Why you actually made a breakthrough during our fight. How's this possible? Unlocking sword intent shouldn't be this easy." Even Murakumo was surprised by this turn of events, but Bakurio simply turned to him and said, "This is what you wanted to teach me with this duel, right?" Murakumo calmly nodded and Yoshino suddenly asked curiously, "Why are you guys shocked? Didn't brother Bakurio lose?" Murakumo stared at Bakurio silently before he slowly shook his head and responded, "No. I'm starting to doubt my own knowledge. He clearly just unlocked this ability, yet he doesn't have any talent for wielding the sword. What a weird guy. It took me centuries to unlock it." After coming to terms with the absurdity of what just happened, Bakurio and Yoshino started to officially train with Murakumo and Reiko while the real body slowly read the description of the mastery he just unlocked. Sword Intent Mastery Level 1. Only the true masters that reached the peak of sword arts and fought countless battles could unlock such a mastery. The host gains the ability to manipulate their willpower and transform it into sword energy that can be used to attack and enhance the damage of their sword attacks by 25%. Another ability that relies on the will. First, it was the true fighter mastery, and now this. Now that I think about it, my level with that mastery has already reached 20, which means that I can increase my strength, speed, and defense by 200%. How amazing, this feeling of growing stronger with no limits. It's so refreshing. Then, Bakurio checked his system quests and checked if he got any rewards from leveling his true fighting mastery, and he was delighted that it appeared similar to his previous masteries. Quest True Fighting 1. Reach level 10 in your true fighting mastery. Reward. 30,000 points, 1 talent enhancing ticket. Bakurio's eyes instantly lit up and he almost started laughing loudly as he accepted those rewards with a wide grin and clicked on the description of the talent enhancing ticket. Talent enhancing ticket X1. Can enhance any one of the host's talents by 1 grade. Item will disappear upon consumption. This is a gift sent by the heavens, muttered Bakurio before he directly used the ticket to enhance his only Grandmaster level talent. His body. This is. Just as Bakurio used the ticket, a formless energy covered his body and he couldn't analyze it no matter what dojutsu or senses he used. However, its effects were beyond miraculous as he could sense every single cell of his body going through a unique transformation like small butterflies breaking from their cocoons, and just as this was happening, his perfect body that was trained to the extreme suddenly started to deflate to the point that he turned into a muscular skeleton. This was an extremely painful process that, if not for his pain resistance skill, he didn't know if he could withstand this level of torture. However, when it ended, he didn't care at all about his appearance as he simply stared at his new talent that was shining with a golden light in his system's panel. The current peak of my body is around 1000 points in each attribute. Just how much stronger am I going to get with this talent? Wondered Bakurio with an excited glint in his eyes before he directly used his dark chakra to start training and strengthening his emaciated body, and not even a second later, he was covered in a pitch-black cocoon, for a long time. Ellipsis. Meanwhile, a few days later in a heavily protected location in the Land of Fire, in the first ninja academy to be created to train anyone fit to use chakra from the civilians that lived in the Land of Fire, one of Bakurio's true clones that acted as a teacher was currently observing Kazuki and Sogutsu, who just returned from their missions and were asking for his advice, and Kazuki was the first to speak. Teacher, I learned how to use boil release during this mission. That wolf pack melted in an instant. This guy. He already had the Kekkei Genkei of scorch release and lava release, and now he even learned how to use boil release. What is he going to learn next? Blaze release and start spamming it randomly, wondered Bakurio before he turned to the calm Sogutsu, who also reported his shocking achievement as if fearful that his teacher would think that his brother was better than him. Teacher, I also learned boil release. Spoke Sogutsu, and Bakurio couldn't help but frown. Now they both can use 3 Kekkei Genkei and they only lack 1 each. One lacks light release and the other lacks storm release. Was I right with my guess regarding their origins? As Bakurio was deep in thought, he didn't forget to praise them both, and it seemed like it made them both happy. But Kazuki suddenly grinned and said, now I can defeat you, teacher. You can't boss me around anymore. Sogutsu frowned when he heard this and almost froze Kazuki on the spot as he spoke coldly. Kazuki, show some respect to our teacher. What? I'm just stating the facts. Teacher is strong, but he can't use as much Kekkei Genkei as we do. With our talent, it's a matter of time before we surpass him. Spoke Kazuki arrogantly. You. The calm Sogutsu was truly enraged as his peaceful disposition was covered with waves of chakra reflecting his anger, but Bakurio simply smiled and said, I must say, you are indeed extremely gifted for being able to reach your current level that can allow you to fight cage level ninja. However, you are still far from surpassing your teacher. Let's see then, yelled Kazuki, not convinced before he did some hand signs. Boil release, deadly cloud jutsu. Kazuki inhaled deeply before he exhaled a giant invisible cloud made of boil release that could even melt something as tough as a Susanoo. You idiot. Sogutsu was about to rush and defend in front of Bakurio, but he suddenly felt a hand landing on his shoulder stopping him, and he could see Bakurio smirking and say, don't worry, this is child's play. Kazuki seemed enraged by this and increased the intensity of his attack by releasing much more boiling gas at Bakurio. However, to his and to Sogetsu's surprise, Bakurio calmly walked through his attack. "Careful, teacher," yelled Sogetsu, yet he soon found that it wasn't needed, as no matter how much Kazuki tried, his chakra simply didn't seem to want to follow his command as the cloud of burning gas opened a path for Bakurio to pass through. How's this possible? Why can you control my chakra?" yelled Kazuki with disbelief covering his face, and Sogetsu had a similar look on his face. "The effect of my newly acquired fire and water manipulation is quite good. They can even affect Kekkei Genkei. Although I'm pretty sure that this is only possible thanks to my energy control and Kazuki's low chakra quality," observed Bakurio silently, and concluded that he needs to raise the level of these skills in the future just in case, since he could already feel how hard it is to deal with the current Kazuki. Then, the smile suddenly disappeared from his face as he said, "You truly never learn, do you? I. Before Kazuki could say anything, a highly compressed earth sword manifested in Bakurio's hand, and he sent Kazuki flying with it, where he ended up smashing into the wall and lost consciousness. Brother couldn't even transform his body into fire to dodge. Teacher probably did something to stop him. Take him to the hospital, Sogetsu," spoke Bakurio calmly before taking his leave, and Sogetsu calmly bowed while saying, "Thank you for going easy on my brother," and watched his teacher's lonely back fade into the distance before he went to pick Kazuki up and took him to the hospital. Later that day, Kazuki woke up in his hospital bed with a bewildered look on his face, although he wasn't surprised with his current location since he was used to getting sent here, to the point that he recognized most of the nurses and doctors. "Kazuki-kun, you are finally awake. It seems like you angered Bakurio-san again," spoke the woman that healed his injuries and came to check on him again. Surprisingly, it was Nono Yakushi, Kabuto's adoptive mother. "Nono-san. I did nothing, he's just bad," spoke Kazuki while staring to the side to avoid looking at her directly, but Nono simply patted him on the head, gently making him blush as she said with a smile, Yes, I'm sure it was all Bakurio-san's fault, right?" "Why yes," replied Kazuki without looking at her, although it was clear that he was lying from how hesitant he was speaking. However, Sogetsu suddenly appeared beside him and punched him in the head hard enough to make sure that it would swell up before he spoke. "You idiot, when will you grow up?" "Sogetsu. You bastard want to fight?" yelled Kazuki as the two brothers butted heads with each other as they exchanged glares, but Nono suddenly held them both by the ears and separated them from each other. Ouch, Nono-san, please stop," spoke the two brothers at the same time, showing just how similar they were despite their differences, but Sogetsu suddenly said, "Nono-san, you shouldn't be nice to him. He has been attacking our teacher whenever he grows even a bit stronger. One day he might kill him if this goes on." Nono froze slightly when she heard what Sogetsu said before she turned to Kazuki and noticed his lowered head and asked, "Why are you doing this, Kazuki-kun?" Seeing the serious and angry look on her face made Kazuki annoyed, so he carelessly said, "Why do you care? He's just a teacher who happened to develop a new method for training ninja, that's all." Before Kazuki could finish what he was saying, Nono suddenly slapped him and left him wondering what just happened. "Nono-san?" asked Kazuki in bewilderment while staring at Nono's tearful eyes, and he couldn't understand what was the cause of her reaction. "Bakurio-san is not any teacher, and he didn't just happen to find a method to train ninja. He's my savior, and I wouldn't be here if not for him." "Savior?" asked Kazuki in bewilderment while holding the cheek that he just got slapped on, and even Sogetsu was surprised by her words. "Yes, Bakurio-san saved my life in the past, and do you know how old he was when he did that?" asked Nono, suddenly surprising Kazuki and Sogetsu, and the former simply shook his head as he suddenly realized something. There's no mention of teacher's age anywhere in the records of Konoha's Ninja Academy or the current academy. "Why's that?" Sogetsu frowned slightly as he thought, this bastard investigated teacher. He really wanted to beat the living shit out of his brother, but he held himself back as he heard Nono say, "Of course you won't find anything on him because he never entered the academy as a student, and even his registration as a teacher was specially made by the Hokage." "Why?" asked Kazuki curiously, completely forgetting about his burning cheek, and Nono suddenly dropped a bomb on him and Sogetsu. "That's because Bakurio-san is only 11 or 12 years old currently. He's of the same generation as the two of you." Kazuki and Sogetsu suddenly felt their minds going blank, and he suddenly recalled how he mocked his teacher. "With our potential, we will surpass you sooner or later." Impossible! Yelled Kazuki in disbelief as Bakuryo's image and actions simply didn't remind him of someone so young, but what he was in even more disbelief of is the fact that he saved her life. He never very well that Nono was quite the capable ninja despite her amiable disposition. He must have saved you from some random bandit or beasts, right? Nono couldn't help but shake her head before she dropped another bomb on the two boys' ears. At the age of 7 or 8, Bakuryo-kun saved me and my adoptive son from the pursuit of the third Tsuchikage and 3 of his most elite ninjas, some of them are even at the cage level currently. I'm sure you've heard of the strength of Mr. Onoki. This, Kazuki's eyes widened in disbelief, but Sogetsu suddenly asked curiously, I heard that teacher played a key role in the negotiations with the Land of Earth to found the current alliance. Does it have something to do with this incident? That's right. Nono nodded at him in appreciation before she said, during that encounter, he spared the life of the Tsuchikage's granddaughter Kuretsuchi. That was the basis of the rebirth of trust between our hidden village and theirs. How's this possible? How can he be that strong? Asked Kazuki again, but Nono simply remained silent before she replied, I don't know, all I know is that he sacrificed his childhood to reach his current level of strength. In fact, he's still not thinking about himself. You will understand one day how much this world is surviving by hanging on a thread woven solely with the hard work of Bakuryo-san. Kazuki couldn't help but find himself remembering their first encounter with Bakuryo. He and Sogetsu were making their way to the village that was attacking theirs because of the fear they had of their existence and potential, which led them to attack what they started to consider home. Yet, despite trying to take his life, Bakuryo still took them under his wing and showered them with nothing but kindness. Yet, the worse the situation of the world got, the stronger Kazuki wanted to become, as if a hidden urge inside of him was being ignited. Also, he can protect those he held dear, but his teacher kept holding him back from following that urge, which would have ended with him seeking fights recklessly even if it meant using his friends as baits. So, he made his goal to beat his teacher so that he can do whatever he wants, yet no matter how much he tried, he always ended up failing. Time after time, he couldn't even land a hit on his teacher, but he always attributed that to their difference in age, and he was sure he could catch up to him in terms of strength sooner or later and even surpass him. Yet that day never arrived, and he simply kept discovering how abnormally strong his normal-looking teacher was. And now, he was told they were of the same age. How could he accept this? How? Suddenly, Kazuki felt something breaking in the deepest parts of his soul as a terrifying demonic aura bloomed with him at its center in the shape of a dark rose before he screamed into the air, suddenly startling Sogetsu and Nono. Kazuki-kun! Yelled Nono, but Kazuki remained unresponsive as the demonic aura covered his body and created shockwaves that destroyed the hospital room before it went back inside him again, and he started staring at his hands with a mad grin on his face. Finally, I'm awake. Aster's gift is truly miraculous, spoke Kazuki with a weird orange glint in his eyes. Kazuki-kun. Nono spoke lightly, but Sogetsu suddenly put her behind him to protect her and faced his brother before he said with an eerie calmness, Who are you? Kazuki, whose red eyes turned into yellowish orange, stared with a wild smile at Sogetsu before he said, I sense my brother's presence in you. Ha 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 ha, who would have thought, after all these years, we would still be together? Seeing the maniacal laughter on his brother's face, Sogetsu was more than sure that this wasn't his brother, but he still tried to wake him up. Kazuki, wake up. Don't let a demon take over your body. Oh, it seems like you already realized the secret of your own existence. You even inherited my brother's genius. Interesting, you two are perfect vessels for our revival and pursuit of revenge. But first, let me help this little one achieve his little request. Seeing the evil smirk on Kazuki's face, Sogetsu suddenly felt a chill in his heart as he had an idea what he was going to do, but just as he yelled, Ice release. Ice prison jutsu. To stop him, the possessed Kazuki simply disappeared into a puff of flames. What's going on, Sogetsu-kun? Asked Nono hurriedly, but Sogetsu directly started running while leaving one sentence behind. Send help quickly, teacher is in danger. Ellipsis. Sogetsu rushed at his top speed in hope of catching up to Kazuki and saving his teacher, yet no matter how fast he rushed, he soon arrived at his teacher's home and found to his shock that it was set on an orange fire that burned with a demonic glint. And from inside the second story of the house, he heard the sound of an eerie laughter. He, Is this the weakling that was delaying my return? How disappointingly weak. Sogetsu had just jumped to the second floor of the house only to see his brother carrying their struggling teacher by the neck before he turned to him with a wider grin and simply snapped the head of their teacher. Crack. Sogetsu felt his whole world stop as the sound of Bakuryo's neck breaking echoed in the room, and even Kazuki had tears streaming down his face as if he wasn't in control at all, yet he could see what was happening. Sogetsu remained watching like that as his teacher's lifeless body fell to the ground and the light soon disappeared from his eyes, and slowly, the shock in his eyes turned to a normal look, and then it turned into a serene calmness as a cold voice spoke from Sogetsu's body. Brother, you went too far, you almost broke this little kid's mind. You know we still need them to fully restore our strength. Ha ha ha, sorry, but this is the fastest way I could think of to awaken you. Replied Kazuki, to which Sogetsu slowly approached the fallen corpse of their teacher and simply said, too bad, this guy is quite a talent, we could have made use of him. That I agree with, replied Kazuki, but suddenly an eerie aura manifested behind them and they both instantly felt a chill as a calm voice slowly spoke, really? I'm all ears, tell me how you intend to make use of me. Kazuki and Sogetsu instantly wiped their heads around, only to find themselves staring at a perfectly healthy Bakuryo staring at them coldly, and the former couldn't help but stare between this new arrival and the body on the ground. How the hell did you survive? Meanwhile, Sogetsu's eyes flickered eerily before his hair began to float in the air as spoke coldly, you planned all of this from the start. Hearing this, Bakuryo couldn't help but grin at the two of them before he said eerily, welcome to the human world, Enja, Suiya. Then, an aura full of death suddenly exploded from his body in the form of tentacles that rushed to get hold of the two brothers. Kazuki's eyes were full of rage as he stared at his enemy that was clearly underestimating them, causing his hair to burst into orange flames before he yelled, infernal charge. Meanwhile, Sogetsu on the other hand started floating with an eerie look on his face while a cyan aura started to revolve around his body as he said, peaceful execution, and right after he finished what he said, countless cyan-colored water slashes were launched at Bakuryo and started to counter his death energy. Inside the burning house and faced with the terrifying demonic flame and water blades, Bakuryo felt as if time was still as he took his time to observe the attacks of the possessed brothers in their current state. This orange fire and cyan water are truly terrifying. They still didn't reach the level of an evolved chakra nature such as Blaze Release, but they can definitely give it a fight. Can they apply the same enhancement with their gift to the rest of their Kekkei Genkei? As Bakuryo was wondering this, he used his death energy to fend off the deadly water blades before he calmly jumped over the rushing Kazuki and dropped a few exploding tags on him. Yet, despite the terrifying explosion, Kazuki was completely unharmed while the burning house was completely destroyed, and Bakuryo calmly picked up the corpse of his true clone and simply jumped to the outside. Yet just as his foot touched the ground, Sogetsu appeared silently behind him with a cyan sword in his hand and he was swinging it right at the back of his neck. Sneaky brat, thought Bakuryo before he squatted right in time and hit Sogetsu backward with his elbow while using the gentle fist, which created a terrifying shockwave that sent Sogetsu flying. However, his body simply rippled like waves on the ocean and he easily negated all the damage, and Bakuryo watched this coldly and thought, it seems like my water manipulation isn't high enough in level to hinder this demon's control over his chakra. TCH. The two brothers didn't stop their attacks at all, as Kazuki emerged like a meteor from the broken house, but Bakuryo managed to get away in time while still carrying the true clone in his hands. In fact, even the Bakuryo currently fighting was only a true clone as well, since the real body was still inside his dark chakra cocoon. But he wasn't worried as he said to the two brothers calmly, let's make this a fair fight. Just as he said this, Sogetsu tried to stab him in the back again while Kazuki rushed from the front in a coordinated attack. However, this time Bakuryo completely ignored Sogetsu and let go of the clone, and put all of his focus on attacking Kazuki. This will cost you your life, thought Sogetsu with a ruthless look in his eyes as he saw Bakuryo turning his back on him, but suddenly, just when he thought that he can easily finish the job with his blade, the falling true clone that Kazuki killed by snapping his neck suddenly stood up on his own while his broken neck returned back to its original position and he had a cruel smirk on his face. You're the one who let his guard down. You. Sogetsu tried to readjust his body, but it was too late as the true clone's fist was instantly covered in lava and punched Sogetsu right in the stomach, sending him flying a long distance with a giant cloud of smoke emerging from his body and making him cough blood and wince in pain. It seems like playing dead with dark chakra is quite effective. I should use it more often, thought Bakurio as he faced the rushing Kazuki before he calmly extended his hand at him. Ha! You will be evaporated instantly. Idiot! Yelled Kazuki full of confidence, but Bakurio simply smiled as his extended hand suddenly became pitch black and it gave Kazuki a bone-chilling feeling just by staring at it. What the hell is this? He wondered, but it was too late as Bakurio calmly muttered, "Dark touch." In just an instant, the rushing Kazuki that was covered in orange flames came to a complete stop as his whole body was covered with countless seals. Then, he simply started contorting into all kinds of shapes and forms and he lost all control over his body, but at least he survived since he can transform into flames, but it didn't do much to free him from the curse of dark touch. Then, Bakurio calmly covered his leg in ice release and delivered a few kicks to Kazuki, and he wasn't able to negate the damage of those kicks. Meanwhile, the other true clone was doing the same to Sogetsu while using lava release while the two demons kept wailing, and Sogetsu eventually reformed his head and spoke eerily, "If you kill us, the two kids will die as well. Their souls are under our complete control and we will make sure that you wouldn't even be able to revive them." The lava fist and frozen kick paused slightly as the two Bakurios stared at the demons with tilted heads before a terrifying aura burst from the two of them. "Oh, you are threatening me. Guess I should go finish off the lineage of that demoness that caused this mess in the first place." Sogetsu froze suddenly and the struggling Kazuki was the same. Aster's lineage is still alive. If we can make use of her gift, then we. Countless thoughts flashed through Suiya's mind before he eventually spoke eerily. "Let's make a deal. You let us use these bodies and we will help you face the darkness." Bakurio stared at him like an idiot before he let out a small chuckle. "What are you laughing about?" yelled Kazuki before his face instantly got deformed again from the effect of dark touch that was still taking place. "It's just funny to think that you would really believe me when I said this was a fair fight." As Bakurio said this, Sogetsu's eyes instantly shined coldly and he was planning to explode directly and wipe out anything nearby. Yet, he suddenly found that he can't control his chakra at all. Bakurio smirked when he saw this before he asked him, "Did you think I was hitting you just to torture my poor students? I can tell that you are no different than the tailed beasts in terms of nature. However, your control over your chakra is leaps beyond theirs. But, the main weakness of a Jinchuriki and the beast inside it is still the same, the body. If you can't use its chakra channels, you won't be able to do anything, and I already blocked every Tenketsu with my 6-path Sage Chakra. Why you? These vessels will die. Don't worry, that's my own problem to solve." Bakurio's eyes shined coldly before the two true clones suddenly started creating hundreds of seals. "What are you doing?" yelled the usually calm Sogetsu, feeling that the situation was beyond his expectations, but Bakurio didn't answer him. "Since you acted like a beast, I will treat you as one. 9 stars demonic seal." Suddenly, the seals the two clones were weaving and spreading on the ground under them started to accumulate into 9 clumps each before they started rising in the air behind them, and the two true clones suddenly said coldly, "Enjoy the seal I designed just for you, you." "Fine brother, do it. Let's end their lives." Suiya suddenly gave a cruel order and Enja planned to execute it right away as they attacked the souls of Sogetsu and Kazuki. The two brothers only stared helplessly and struggled with all their efforts, but the two demons were simply too strong. However, just as they were about to lose their lives, weird cages fell from the air and held the two demons in place for just enough time to let the seals take effect. Good thing the main body focused on soul control, thought the true clones before they started healing the slowly awakening Kazuki and Sogetsu. Teacher. The usually cold and hot-blooded brothers were nothing but kids at the moment as they burst into tears and hugged their teacher whom they thought they lost because of their own demons. "It's okay now," spoke Bakurio with a gentle smile as he hugged the two brats back, feeling nostalgic as he was reminded of his own old family. Thank you for listening guys, see you in the next part.